Hi everyone, thanks for joining me today on Food for Thought. I'm Deborah Walker and I have the lovely Ruth Fox with me today, who's a therapist and trainer from Sheffield who specialises in using emotional freedom technique. Hi Ruth, how are you today?
I'm very well, thank you, Debbie. It's lovely to hear you.
Thank you. And so just give my audience a little bit of background about yourself and how you started using EFT.
Well, I've had a kind of quite a journey really that took me into this kind of work that developed over a period of probably going back over 20 years when I first got myself interested in how people can make changes and how healing techniques can help them. And I think about 10 years ago I started to actually work with people, helping them to release old patterns that no longer serve them, emotional patterns and so forth. And I came across EFT. And I do use quite a lot of other modalities along with it, a variety of modalities along with it. But when I came across EFT, it was funny really, because I was in a workshop where EFT was just a component of it, and we'd just been shown it in the morning really. And I came home that weekend, and on the Monday, one of my neighbours who I know popped in to see me, and she said, how are you doing and everything? She said, well, you can hear I've had this awful cold and I can't get rid of it. And I'm still wheezing. And you know when you can hear somebody's breath sort of going when they're breathing, that you can actually hear it, sort of that kind of thing. So I said, oh, let me try this thing on you that I've just learned at the weekend. It's really good, let's have a go, you know. And she went, all right then. Anyway, 20 minutes later, she was breathing completely clearly.
Wow. And
that really got my attention, as you can imagine. So I pursued further training with EFT, and that has gradually brought me through. And I've used it in many, many ways since then. Just seen some amazing shifts take place, and that wasn't a fluke, as it were.
So, explain exactly how it works. For those my audience who don't really know about it.
Well, the person who actually developed EFT, Gary Craig, who did absolutely an amazing job of creating this modality, putting it out to the world, he always explained it as a way of clearing an interference or a kind of blip in your energy flow, or your energy system. And that makes a lot of sense in a way, because when you look at the knowledge that is around about energy, and I mean energy is a very kind of widely used term in the whole field of complementary therapy, but when you look at, say, the quantum physics approach, where when you go down to the very smallest part of structure of matter, when you go actually smaller than the electrons and the microns, you are actually finding that it's just vibrating energy. So in that way, if we are completely made of energy and we're working on the meridian system, which is an energy flow, it just seems to make sense that we're working in quite a profound way on the structure of what we are made of. And in that way, I also feel that thoughts and emotions are also somehow an energetic thing. However, in terms of actually, hard science, I don't believe that has been proven in terms of EFT, though there have been quite a lot of studies done now. There's been lots of studies done over the last 20 years, and certainly there have been studies done that show changes in brain activity as a result of and changes in cortisol levels and so forth, body changes. It's been discovered in one study that it seems to calm the amygdala, which is the fight and flight center in the brain, where the fight or flight kind of reactions take place. But the hard science, in terms of the actual physical nature of it, I don't feel is fully explained. However, the actual effects and the results that are being obtained with this modality are absolutely stunning. and they have been studied also. I mean, I myself was involved in a study earlier this year, and there's many of them done now, showing how effective it is in in controlled studies, as well as all the stories and all the kind of the feedback that we've been getting from all over the world for the changes that people have experienced.
It is fascinating. I know years ago, this is a long time ago, when I looked at EFT, I started becoming interested in it, and I got the DVDs from them. I don't know if they still even send the DVDs out, but you got this huge pack of DVDs. And one of the DVDs showed Gary himself reducing the post-traumatic stress that veterans had had.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's been a study done in the last 12 months which shows, I think, and I'm not going to I don't want people to quote me exactly on this, but I think they gave them 6 sessions, and around about 80% of them were no longer able to be classified as post-traumatic stress afterwards. So that's a stunning result, and I'm of the view that probably the others just needed more sessions, just from my own experiences of seeing how brilliant it deals, how well EFT can actually clear trauma and post-traumatic stress from people's. It's as if, I mean, when people have gone through that process, they sort of report, I can remember it. I don't know if you saw those videos of Gary. There was somewhere he worked with the veterans, I think it was 96, in the Los Angeles War Veterans Center. And there was a guy, and he said when he cleared his trauma, he said it's like a bad memory. It's like something bad that happened a long time ago. So it's not like he didn't forget what had happened, but what had happened was that the emotional charge was no longer there. Yeah. So he didn't go into this kind of awful thing where things would press the button and it would just set the whole terrible kind of extreme emotional reaction off, which is what post-traumatic stress does. Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic thing for helping, and I feel that there's no, there are people who've worked with who've suffered from post-traumatic stress for decades in this world, and there hasn't been something that could really do that for them. They've just been managed rather than cured, as it were. Yeah, it's amazing.
So you said it's like clearing, it's like an energy blip that you're clearing in the energy field, and you've mentioned the meridians. Is it like acupuncture then in its approach?
Well, to be honest, even though I'm an experienced practitioner and trainer of EFT, because of the elegant and kind of simplified way that Gary Craig developed this system, you don't actually have to have an in-depth knowledge of the meridian system in order to use EFT. It's a bit like the analogy of driving a car, for instance. To be a good driver, you might need to know how to check the oil and fill up with petrol, your tyres, but you don't actually need to know how the engine works. And in that way, I mean, that was really the brilliance of Gary's vision, really, because he'd actually learned thought field therapy, which was in a way, it was a very similar. It was a precursor to EFT, which developed by Roger Callahan in America. And but thought field therapy was kind of like you had to have the right tapping in the right spot at the right time for each condition. So it was very complex. Mm. And what Gary did was he thought, well, hang on a minute, this is so complicated. What about if we just tapped all the points for everything? I mean, I love simplicity. When things are made simple and yet work so powerfully, I think that's one of the things that attracted me to EFT. That and its availability, because it's a system that people can learn to use and use self-help. So it's massively personally empowering for people to be able to work with themselves and help themselves on a daily basis. That's the other thing that I love about it, and why I've kind of stuck with it and worked with it.
And Do you find that people pick it up easily when you're teaching them?
Well, now it's interesting with the EFT because it's when Gary developed it, as you remember from those old videos, he had a particular system. So he had a format, if you like.
Yeah.
And he had an amazing vision, which was he kind of gave it to the world and said, take this, develop it, use it, give me feedback, tell me how it goes. And that has actually happened, and it's happened beautifully. Because when I first came across the EFT, I have to say that while I was absolutely stunned by how effective it was, I was always slightly I always found the format a little bit clunky. And it's when I teach the basic format on the first morning of the first day, but then all the kind of more elegant ways that it's been simplified and streamlined and so on then come in. Because what people did discover when they started to use it more and more, and I think Gary discovered this as well, was that actually you can use it in even more simple way, i.e. continuous tapping, which is very different in a way, and the great difference to be using it in a sort of continuous tapping kind of way is that it makes it even more accessible.
Because I remember the original instructions.
The ham sandwich.
Well, also, not only did you tap on the main points, you did your hand, and also then you do all these eye techniques.
That's right. Yeah.
And everything. And in fact, I can understand why he did all those things. In hindsight, I understand it far more now than I ever did. But what I notice now with the practitioners, or some of the practitioners that I engage with, is they don't do that in the same way anymore. It has evolved into almost an even simpler system that they use. Absolutely.
I mean, the original system had a setup which was saying certain kinds of phrases 3 times.
Yeah.
And then it had a round, which is tapping all around the points while saying a word or a short phrase that described the issue. Well, to go back a step, EFT needs you to absolutely focus on a very specific aspect of the negative that you're wanting to clear or heal. And a lot of people find this quite counterintuitive in a way, because they're sort of like, well, if they've had any experience of using affirmations, it seems like you're doing the absolute opposite. Because, you're sort of saying, say for instance, you've got the fear of something, you'll be talking about the fear while you're tapping, you'll be focusing onto it. But that's how it works, because as you're focused into it, then the tapping works with that which you're focused on. So the way that Gary designed that was to sort of use this setup phrase, which was designed to, it's a phrase that includes an assertion of self-acceptance, along with the, identifying the issue that you're wanting to clear. So it goes something like, the way he prescribed it was something like, even though I have this, and then he would describe whatever it is. Say it's a headache. So even though I have this headache, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And this will be spoken 3 times over while tapping a particular point on the edge of the hand or rubbing a sore spot in the chest. And that was designed, as he said so, to clear what he called psychological reversal, which was people sort of having resistance to healing. However, and then after that, we would tap around the points while alluding to this same thing, like this headache, this headache, this headache, this headache, like that. And really, the format of the words on the round, tapping round, is just a way of keeping you focused on the issue. And then he would do this middle bit, which is called the 9 gamut.
Yeah.
And that's actually, I still teach it like in the first hour of the training, because people need to know where it's all come from and how it works. And because they may, if they feel stuck, want to go back and do the entire process. But the 9 gamut had these kind of pattern breaking things in them, which is moving you from left to right in your brain and so on, which would mean singing happy birthday and saying numbers and things like that. So you start doing this tapping thing with people, and you've actually picture this, you've said to someone, look, I know this seems really ridiculous and crazy, but it works, so why not try it? And they're like, okay then. And then you start going into this. Yeah, it's funny. But so that would be, you do a round, then the 9 gamut, then the round, and that was kind of affectionately referred to by Gary as the ham sandwich. What I discovered, I got involved with some wonderful people who I've learned from over the years, and Steve Wells and David Lake, who are based in Australia and who were in the EFT right from the beginning. They really experimented with the format and decided that neither the setup nor the 9 gamut was necessary, and that in fact you can just continuously tap while focusing on the issue.
And I find it fascinating that I actually work with it sometimes, and I will hold the points and then just get the person to clear. So I will work on specific points because I've worked out that during the session on when they've been talking about it, that actually it's affecting certain meridians, and I can tell that, or they're holding certain parts of their body.
Yeah, absolutely. People instinctively hold or stroke or tap themselves already, quite often in ways that are very similar or the same as the way we use in the EFT, because the thing is, people are very intuitive. And this is the other thing that I love about EFT, is that when I discovered that I kind of had permission to not have to stick to the basic format all the time, that was fantastically liberating for me.
Did you tap on that?
I was kind of having this sort of debate with myself about whether I could deviate or not. I can remember actually asking Gary Craig when he came to England if I could teach EFT without the 9 gamut, and he sort of said, no, you must teach the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, right, okay. Because I was noticing he wasn't using it so much. Bless his heart, he's done an amazing thing. But yeah, it has developed. And what's so beautiful about the continuous tapping is that, we're able to use it along with a conversation, which can be, the way that I would use it with a client is a therapeutic conversation in which I'm using all my skills as a therapist and, from all the modalities that I've learned. And so that it's kind of a win-win, because it's a bit like what you're doing. You can bring the tapping in with something else that is also an effective modality and use them together, which is great to be able to do.
I get some of the best results when I have them either, if I'm only using EFT, for instance, if I'm getting them to play what's happened in their head, so they don't want to talk about it, but they play it in their head so they can see it, or they are just chatting away, and at that point I will, if they're emotionally incredibly upset, I will then do the tapping for them. I'll even do it on myself, and that's what's really interesting as well, Ruth, isn't it? That
absolutely,
because it's energetic.
Very interesting.
Yeah, you don't have to be physically having to do it to yourself. You can either imagine it, or you can somebody else can surrogate for you. What's your experience of that?
Oh, I've had some great experiences of that. I can remember one night when I was just so fed up with my partner snoring again. And there's this thing when they're snoring, it's like if you actually disturb them by kind of, getting stern with them verbally or giving them a shove, they will stop for a few seconds, but those few seconds is just not long enough for you to get to sleep. So they start up again, while you're still. So I tapped myself surrogately for him, and I actually did 4 rounds. And each round the snoring went quieter, and the last one it went quiet, and I went off to sleep. That was quite amazing.
Women around the globe will be rejoicing at that, that.
Tapping. I mean, it's amazing. There are different ways of doing it. I mean, there are people who use teddy bears, tapping bears, with which they work with children, which is wonderful. They've got little buttons sewn on the bears to show where the points are. And but the surrogate tapping is fantastic. Or you can tap yourself and imagining that you're tapping them instead of tapping yourself, or you can just imagine, you can actually just tap yourself while holding the concept of what's happening. One of the stunning things that I've had experience of is on aeroplanes, where there's a child who's distressed, several rows up, 15 rows in front of you or something like that. A baby crying, because the pressure bothers them. And I've had a number of experiences when I've been flying where when we're going up and the child's crying, I've surrogately tapped myself for the child and the child has stopped crying. And I had one where the child did not stop crying. So I kind of, we develop our intuition really when we're using these kind of processes. So I kind of reached out with my, with my intuitive aspect, and realised that the mother was quite distressed, because can you imagine taking a baby on a long flight? She must have been really wound up and worried about her child disturbing people or whatever. I didn't even get the nature of it, didn't need to. I just felt the distress. So I surrogately tapped for the mother, and then the child stopped crying.
So you're working on both emotional and physical at the same time, aren't you? As well, and on different people there who are obviously connected, which just shows you how energy works, how we are all interconnected, doesn't it, really?
It's extraordinary, and we kind of can't necessarily measure it all, but there's a sort of kind of, that does bring in the intuitive side, because I find that just using a modality like this does develop that aspect in people. Commonly when we work with the emotional landscape with people, when they're suffering with something, as they clear what they're suffering with, they connect more with their own inner knowing and their own deep wisdom and their own truth, actually. And that's a wonderful thing to be part of, I must say. Yeah.
It's fascinating when you work on something emotionally and the physical side starts to disappear. That's what I find. What's your experience of that happening?
Well, we are very much, we're not just connected with each other, we're completely connected within ourselves. And so commonly I will often when somebody's there with an emotional feeling, I will guide them to contact the corresponding body feelings. And I use that method a lot, especially often initially as well. Because when you connect with the feeling part of yourself, then you really do start to get to the truth of the matter. And interestingly, the body expresses everything. So whether it's just a tightness or a slight discomfort, a twinge, or whether it's a major catastrophic health illness type thing, there's connections. We don't always know what they are, but there are connections right through somebody's whole being, and we can't go in with any assumptions at all about this. So the way I approach is, to me, everyone is a complete mystery to me, and I just approach them with an openness and a willingness to be with whatever is there, whatever reveals itself as we work. Yeah. But it's very, very interesting. There's always a reason why people are uncomfortable. I saw something on Facebook today and it was like, oh, it's pointless thinking about this, but people, I can't remember what it was. It's like people spend so much time worrying about blah, 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 and they just don't need to. And I thought, actually, there's always a reason. We don't know what it is, and it may seem completely foolish to be worrying about blah, 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 but there will be some reason, some kind of strange logical, it might not be a clear kind of logic, but there's a kind of a set of events that created that reason, and that reason is there. And it may not be serving them, but there is always something that's triggered things, people to adopt attitudes and behaviours and responses and reactions. It's so when we go in with a sort of therapeutic tapping, then we're just kind of gently allowing that to surface, so that we can be clearing. Quite often, we may just be clearing something that's quite near the surface, or sometimes something will emerge where the connection becomes known, and then we can work with the deeper aspects as well, clear those.
I find the language that people use is incredibly important for actually getting to the deeper issues. What do you find?
Absolutely, and I mean, one of the classic ways that I've seen EFT, when I have seen it not working quite so well, is when somebody's working with somebody and they are the person who's being the client is describing the problem, but then the person who's delivering the tapping is guiding them to speak about it in a way that wasn't derived from their own words. And that can be just a slight interpretation or even a projection, and then it just kind of doesn't resonate. So it's always really important when you're working with someone to be very much in tune with what they're expressing, and if you are guiding them to use words, to kind of use their words if you possibly can. And if you find yourself using any words they haven't used, always be kind of very, very mindful to observe whether it sits right or it doesn't, or even ask them. Because if it doesn't, then it's not going to be in tune with that resonance of that particular aspect that you're wanting to clear. So it's like tuning in. And you don't need to think or be clever to tune in. In a way, what you need to do when you're working in a client situation is to just observe and listen to the person in front of you, because they're giving you lots and lots of information all the time. When you're working with yourself, I think sometimes if you can get stuck working with yourself, because sometimes you just need a guide to have that observation in a way. But when you're working with yourself, it's just literally, it's tapping with whatever's there. So it's noticing what's there, noticing how it feels, and tapping with the feelings or the thoughts, the sensations, the emotions. And it's anything that is not completely comfortable you can tap with. So that's my definition of what can work on with EFT, is anything that isn't completely comfortable. If you like. Well, and funnily enough, a lot of people get so far and they go, I'm okay now. And you look at them and you think, well, you've got to a level where you think you can tolerate this. But people don't even know what really feeling comfortable is sometimes with a particular issue, because they've had it so long and they've put up with it and been brave and strong and got through, Well, and yet there's more clearing can be done, and a greater level of comfort and a greater level of freedom sometimes. And I just keep, I always keep going gently until they feel really free and they feel really like they've relaxed. And just got the shift.
It is a fascinating process, to be honest, because I find it's almost like a delayering process. And if you pursue that, for me, I use a mixture of energy therapies, and I know when I use them on myself, it just brings the experience to my body that I never have experienced outside of using this work.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, it's almost like our lives are kind of layered up with experiences, really, right the way from dot, and sometimes before dot, if you like.
Yeah.
And in any given moment, say today, here, now, we're in this space of who we feel we are and where we feel we are and how we feel it is. And sometimes a lot of that is something that's been pretty much the same for a long time, with variations, with kind of seasonal variations. But there are aspects of how we are that have literally been the same for years. And it's almost like it's the wallpaper. And so we don't actually know that there's something that could be outside of that could be different from that, because that's just become our concept of our concept of just our environment, if you like. And that's why on my website I've got something at the top about, maybe the impossible can become possible. Because for me, what I love about this work is this, is the possibility that you could expand and discover that you actually, your environment is far, far greater than you ever thought it was, or could ever remember thinking it was. So I believe we truly know this deep, deep inside. We forget, we forgot, and we're not aware. So just seeing that kind of expansion take place, and it's like, oh my goodness, the world is more open and there's more of me than I realised. That's, I'm sure that resonates with you too.
Well, yeah, when I know when people are ill who come to see me, they often are in such a poor way that even considering those things is something that they just can't get beyond. They can't see anything but the health picture that they've got now. And often I see people who have no understanding about what feeling good, as you were saying, really truly feels like.
I know. People are really, amazing, actually. When I look at people, sometimes I just think, wow, gosh, the ability for the human to sort of endure, survive, and find a way through is just absolutely stunning. I kind of feel humbled by that. And it's not for us to have a view about how they should or could be. It's just to be kind of receiving people of where they are now and just giving them assistance. That's something that's going to be gentle for them and not challenge. I mean, that's the other thing about EFT that I do love in terms of working with deep pain and trauma, is that it can be very gently done. And why not? I mean, if you go for therapy, do you want to come out the room feeling better or feeling worse? And I know I've met quite a few people who've said, oh, I've been for counselling and I came out feeling absolutely awful and I'm still recovering 2 days later. And yet, I think that what happens with some therapeutic talk therapies is that things kind of get stirred up. Sorry, I caught the mic again because I'm talking with my hands. Things kind of get stirred up, but not cleared.
Yeah.
And the clearing process can be rather slow and subtle, but the stirring up process maybe kind of go ahead of the clearing process in a lot of talk therapies. Whereas with the beauty about the tapping is that you're always clearing all the time when you're tapping. And there are definitely techniques as to how you can approach things very, very gently, kind of circle around them and nibble away the discomforts that are right at the very, very edge first. So you don't kind of go marching into a big trauma. Just nibble it away really gently round so that the person can feel safe and comfortable and that they don't have to go there, but you just can work your way very, very gently and clearing as you go along. So typically people usually leave a session feeling better, feeling more relaxed, feeling lighter and more positive than when they came in, even though you may be doing ongoing work that's going to take several sessions. You feel better after each one.
Now I have, I end up using a mixture of energy therapies, and mainly that's because I can put EFT in with someone and I don't get results, or I'm not seeing any changes and they're not experiencing anything. And then I'll just move through other techniques that I've got bit by bit until I find one that really fits with them. But do you have that same thing happen with EFT, or is that just me not using it very well? She says.
I can't possibly comment.
Why do some people get results? Is probably what I'm asking, and why do some people not get results?
Well, it is a technique. So the more kind of skills you add to it as a therapist, then you're probably the better results you get as well. But it also depends on focus. I think for the EFT, it works when you're focusing very specifically on specific aspects of the whole issue. So, for instance, a whole issue might be something like, I could never kind of keep a good relationship or something like that. That's like a global issue. It's a big general issue. But specific aspects might be something like, he said that phrase to me, or that that moment when that happened, that just suddenly shifted my emotion into something unpleasant, I felt that so specific. Steve Wells used to quote in his trainings Robert Cialdini's model, which was like a big table with many legs, and that the kind of overarching issue is like the tabletop, and the many legs are the aspects that are holding it up. And so the way that the best way to work with EFT is to really kind of drill it down to the aspects and just clear them one by one. And the beauty of it is when you do that, you get very specific, and then you can really see, that particular thing, and you can sort of test if it's cleared and so on. But the beauty of it is that you don't have to clear all the table legs in order for the whole thing to collapse. Quite often it's a relatively small number. I mean, in that video that I was referring back to again in one of those Gary Craig videos when he was working with PTSD with the veterans, there was a man he worked with there who had, when he asked him how many really intensely bad war memories he thought he had, he said he reckoned it was about 100 or 120.
Gosh. And
he worked very carefully through 4 of them with him, and then the whole thing was clear. So of course what happens is that we often have a configuration where we have many repeated experiences which are actually coming with the same theme. It can kind of bounce through our lives. But yeah, it's wonderful that you can you don't have to. The thing that I love about this work, this clearing work that I do, is that we do not have to make people better in any way, and we do not have to direct healing in that sense. Though I would say I definitely would be guiding. But the thing is that when people let go of the difficulties and the discomforts and the pain and the fears and all the rest of it, when they let go of those things that are causing them so much pain and discomfort, they default to healing. They actually default to their natural, flowing, connected, happy, healthy default position. And I just find that sort of wonderful, because it's like everybody knows how to be well underneath all the, whatever you call it, underneath all the sort of difficulties and all the mess that they might be in. There is a truth that's underneath that, where they just automatically will go back to when the difficulties and the pain and the problems are removed.
But I think this technique enables people to take control of the fact that we have an innate ability to heal ourselves.
Absolutely, and that's the other reason why I love it so much, because it's so self-empowering. So people, I've been talking a lot about using it therapeutically as a therapist with clients, but actually one of the reasons I love it so much is that my clients will get to learn to use it on themselves on the first visit. And so, between visits and also in an ongoing way, when they can come and learn it from me in a training. They don't even need to be a one-to-one client. Go away and tap themselves and play with it, experiment with it, and it's fantastic. And the way that we've sort of refined it in the sort of the continuous tapping techniques mean that you can actually use it in your life. Because most people, if you teach them a healing modality, they're going to sort of go away and think, okay, well, it'd be great if I go and do a session with myself every 3 times a week or whatever, and then just never get round to it. Yeah. But the beauty about the sort of simplification of the tapping, for me, is that you can tap along with. Could you imagine when you're in a situation in your life, and I always joke about this, like talking to your mother on the phone or something when she's not in her best days. I've done this loads of times. Where I'm talking to my mum on the phone, and there are things she's saying that's pressing my buttons, and I'm literally tapping myself while I'm on the phone with her. How good is that? And that's bringing me down so that I'm not going to necessarily snip at her I'm not so likely to snip back at her because I'm going to go more into that as I'm tapping along with it. Well, I don't need to say any words or make myself focus on what the issue is because I'm already fully focused. And you know what could be a better time to do the clearing work than when you're just there in the moment, focused on something, experiencing a negative, and you can just be tapping along with it, and that can be clearing as you go along in quite an almost an unconscious way. Brilliant. Brilliant.
And in many respects, that's enabling you to move into the future with those things far, far easier, isn't it? Because it's stopping the patterns at that point.
Yeah, and you don't always have to know what you're clearing and how you're clearing it. You know, you could just do it anyway, and it can just work, and it will shift things, and you don't necessarily even have to have your eye on it, or your intellect doesn't have to be analysing it necessarily. I mean, the mind loves to kind of have a view, but, you know, it's not necessary for the healing process. The healing process is all about feeling. It's all about the feeling aspect of ourselves. It's not about the mind is obviously, you know, it's great to kind of do all kinds of exercises with the mind to sort of get it in control or to sort of, you know, calm it down and find peace. But the mind can be a bit of an interference sometimes when you're wanting to feel things because it's full of theories. Whereas the feeling part of you tends to be connected directly to the truth of the matter.
But when you're saying you don't need to know what it is that's the issue, how you're then effectively working with your unconscious mind, aren't you?
I guess, yeah. I mean, you know, it's often useful to know, but you don't necessarily have to make a whole soap opera either of it. You know, sometimes you just need to touch it enough. It's like when I was talking before about getting the resonance of a particular issue or the resonance of that emotion. Sometimes it really helps to touch it enough to know to get, you know, to actually be connecting to that resonance. So the tapping's directly working with that resonance. So yeah, there is a certain amount of detective work and stories do come up, but just you only need to touch it enough to be able to be clearing on it. You don't have to kind of hear the story over and over again, you know, and the pain, sort of the suffering. You know, you don't want people to kind of re-traumatizing themselves, you know, as they're going through it. So the thing is, you know, if an emotion comes up when you're tapping, is always to just keep tapping. If you're working with yourself and you start to feel a strong emotion come up or a discomfort, is don't stop there and think, oh, this doesn't feel good, I need to stop. Just tap, because the tapping will literally take the emotion through much, you know, it will help it to flow through you and out of you quite, you know, relatively quickly.
Now, Nick Ortner says that you can use it with absolutely everything. Has that been the case from your perspective?
Oh, I've got some funny memories of, yes, I would say. I mean, he made a film famously called Try It On Anything.
Yeah.
It's a great title, actually, because, yeah, literally, absolutely, yes.
So what are some of the things you've tried it on? They're a bit more left field.
Well, I've got a very left field one. Years ago, when I was first doing it, I was also doing the accounts of the books for my associate or partner, his plumbing and heating business, and I wasn't doing a very good job of it. I think I just didn't want to be doing it and be doing other stuff. And we had a VAT inspection, and I was a bit worried about it because I thought some of the things that I perhaps hadn't done very well might be construed as being, you know, things that I could get legally in trouble for. If I hadn't kept the books well enough, like, you know, I knew what they've got a reputation for being pretty scary, VAT. And I tapped myself a lot the night before about all my feelings about the VAT inspection and my fears about it. And I was tapping myself very enthusiastically, obviously, because in those days, I don't really use it now, but I used to use the sore spot, which was the 2 spots on the chest where you can rub yourself, as you say, the setup. Mm. And in fact, when I got up in the morning and looked in the mirror, I got 2 bruises on my chest. It's kind of overachieving a bit with the tapping. I went in to meet the VAT inspector, and the VAT inspector walked in, and it was a woman And we had a really very kind of nice little kind of chatty, bondy conversation. We were joking about, I was kind of joking about postmenopausal brainlessness and things like that. I suppose I was kind of trying to lay the ground a little bit. And she said, okay, well, if you could just put your accounts on this, if I could put my disk into your computer or something. And it turned out she had one kind of disk. It was in the old days of floppy disks, and we had the other kind. And she couldn't actually take the information from my computer. And she wasn't allowed, the rules say she can't work on my computer, because if anything goes wrong with it, that she'd be liable. So she actually couldn't look at this particular aspect of the accounts. And I said to her, well, no worries, I'll print it out for you. So I kind of did the print thing, and the printer just wouldn't work. And I'd never done that before. After faffing about trying to get the printer to work, and I think I even rang Jim and said, you know, what do I do? And he said, try this, and we tried, it didn't work. So she said, never mind, I'll look at all this other stuff. So she looked at all this other stuff, which she was quite happy with, other aspects of the accounts, you know. And then she was showing me something on the computer about road charging or something, and she said, I said, well, let's see if it'll print now, and we'll print this off. And it printed. So I said to her, oh, it's printing now. Do you want me to print that? She went, no, I've seen enough, thanks. I'm quite happy with what I've seen. Left. And the printer never failed again. I mean, I've still got that printer now. And that was years ago.
Fascinating.
And so some people might find that bizarre to believe that the tapping could have... But if you read about the field, no, it's an entire field. Mm. And people say, oh yes, we're all connected. You know, well, we're connected with the entire field.
Yeah. And
the entire field doesn't just contain living, breathing beings. It contains all kinds of machines, environments,
all sorts of stuff.
I mean, it's like magic, though, isn't it? When something like that happens, I mean, you know, you can say it's a coincidence, you know, and you can never prove whether it was or it wasn't. It was certainly a massive relief.
Have you ever used it on animals?
Not very much. I did once or twice, and yeah, I have a couple of times actually. Yeah, and I know there are people who work with animals a lot, and works very well. I did use it on a friend. My friend had a rescued dog who was a bit, you know, he had issues, and he was in the car with me, and he had a skin problem, and I just thought, while I was waiting for her, I'd just do a bit of tapping with him for his problem. And so I did a bit of tapping, and I can't remember. I don't think I did tap on him. I think I surrogately tapped with myself. I was sitting with him, near him. And I've no idea whether it had any effect, but I do know this, that every time I ever went to my friend's house, that dog used to just come straight out and just do that thing where they kind of sit on your foot and lean on your leg. And he never does that with anyone. So I think something, you know, energetically, he must have liked something about what I did or how I was with him that made that happen. But I really don't know. I haven't done a lot of work with animals. And certainly, it's a great modality for working with animals, I'm told.
I have, my dog was a rescue dog, and I used quite a lot of EFT on her when I first got her, and I was astonished at how it worked. It was amazing with her. She became a different dog overnight.
Yeah. Did you tap on her?
Yes. So I tapped around her body. I do quite a lot of energy work on her. She's probably fed up of me doing it.
I'm sure she'd have loved it, actually. Like you say, if it's made so many changes, you know, and we're very connected. People are very connected with their pets as well. So it is interesting when people come to me, because I haven't worked very much with children either. But when people come, if somebody came to me with a pet problem, or even with a child issue, I usually advise them to work with me themselves, to let me work on them first. Because they're so connected, and the issues are often very, you know, they're very resonant. So, you know, sometimes people have, you know, the cat's nervous about a similar thing to the owner's nervous about.
Yeah.
And the same with children. Children are very sensitive. So if a parent's worried about a child, then the child's going to be picking up on that. And so whatever issue it is that the child has already is going to be exacerbated by the distress that the parent is feeling inside themselves about, which they may or may not be expressing, but you can't really hide it when you share a house with somebody. And children are just so sensitive, they pick it up anyway. So, I always advise people, if they're worried about their child, which I feel their child needs some tapping, I say, work with yourself first, or work, with a therapist with yourself first. Until you feel very, very still about the problem yourself, and very and in that way, you're a much more supporting influence for the child anyway. But quite often you will find, and I haven't done a lot of this, but I know from other people who have, that the issue for the child is going to shift before you even work with the child, just by clearing with the parent.
Fascinating.
And
Ruth, it's been a lovely interview with you. Thank you very much. And
lovely.
How do people get in contact with you? Because I know you do one-to-one sessions. So how do people find you if they want to work with you?
Well, I do one-to-ones, and I work with Skype and the telephone, so distance is no object, as well as working in person in my room in Sheffield. People can get in touch with me by email. I'll give you my email. By website, looking at my website where they'll find contact details there, or by telephoning me. And so would you like all these details over there?
Yep, I can give them now. So the website is www.ruthfox.co.uk, and the email is ruth@ruthfox.co.uk. She's on Twitter.
Yeah, I am. Just about.
On Facebook, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
So incredibly findable. Now, if I want to brush up on my technique, Ruth, my understanding is you do some workshops as well. When are the next workshops?
Well, I've actually got some training imminent. It's a week on Saturday. I'm doing and it's AAMET approved training. So this is the main body really that's in the UK and also worldwide approved training. And the level 1 is a 1-day course on Saturday, the 28th of September in Sheffield. And this is a 1-day course which will give you a good grounding in the technique. It'll give you the potted history, the history of what you need to know about how it developed, and the original technique, followed by practicing the technique, having demonstrated to you, and being shown ways to use it in a more streamlined way. I highly recommend that anyone who does that 1-day course does the practice day, which is the following day as well, which is a short day, just to get some more experience. And then I'm doing level 2, which is practitioner level, a month later, on the 26th, 27th of October. That's a 2-day course. And if you want to actually be certificated from that one, there are also some you have to do some client sessions and report back on those, to satisfaction, which is pretty straightforward. That's a 2-day course, yes, and that's a month later. I'm actually doing a deal if people are really interested. A lot of people like to do level 1 and 2. And so I'm bundling it all together, level 1, the practice day, and level 2, and giving a price deal on that if you want to book. But I know it's quite soon, but I do have space if anybody wants to still hop in. It'd be lovely to have you. I must say that people do these courses for their own benefit, as well as it's a wonderful thing for people who are already practicing as therapists or coaches. It's a great modality to weave into what you're doing already. And as I've explained before, it can be beautifully kind of woven in with existing therapeutic skills and techniques. However, as a personal journey to do these workshops is fantastically useful for people for their own use, and that we'll be doing some process on the workshops. It's an experiential training, and we have smallish groups, and we like to make it a good, pleasant, enjoyable experience.
And I can say from personal experience that I did EFT and all the energy workshops I've done over the years. I did them from my own personal experience, and I have gained hugely from them, and then I now use them as a practitioner. So I can imagine that anyone who comes on it will only benefit in regards to being able to make incredible change on a personal development level and health level.
Absolutely. And I also would add that, I've attended more than, many trainings. I did my level 1, 2 and 3 really quickly when I first started with EFT, but I've done many trainings with many people. So it's, if you've already done EFT training, that doesn't necessarily preclude coming again and sampling a different flavour, because the trainers, they do vary, and it's often good to kind of be reminded as well. And also just to have the experience, as you say, the healing and transformational experiences that we have in these trainings. Yeah.
Ruth, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been great. Thank you.